Hey, everybody. I want to start by saying, first and foremost, I am a fan of TYT. I watch their show regularly, and I agree with about 99% of the issues, concerns, and positions that they take on political issues. Okay? I don't necessarily agree with all the solutions, but I do agree with the issues and the causes of those issues. I think we have a lot in common there. So why am I making this video? Well, I'm making this video in response to several false and misleading statements that they've made about cryptocurrencies. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Bitcoin bro alert. I get it. And that's fair. I do hold cryptocurrencies, but I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm only here to give you information and let you do what you want with that information, okay? And I get it. Not everybody understands technology. Understanding technology specifically at a protocol level is incredibly difficult, but that doesn't excuse misinformation and false statements about that particular technology. At the end of this video, I will have links in the description for you guys to get other resources and other things that may be able to help you along the way. This is a really big channel. These guys have 1 million subscribers. They have 1 million people who could potentially watch this video. For that reason, I believe they have a responsibility to speak intelligently or informed about the subjects that they're covering, and they are not doing that here. It's actually quite disappointing, pretty sad. So again, I'm going to play the clip, and then after that, I'm going to basically just body bag everything that they say.
Like, guys,
Dogecoin.
This is so obviously not legitimate, right? And again, like, people used to say that the reason why Bitcoin had a utility is that you could give money to people, exchange money without leaving a trace, right? Like when you do a bank transaction or a wire or whatever, there's a record kept of you sending money somewhere and somebody receiving it somewhere else. With Bitcoin, it eliminated that. However, I still haven't been able to get this confirmed or debunked. Like, allegedly, the FBI has a backdoor to Bitcoin now, so you can't even do that anymore. So it doesn't even serve that utility. Look, the general rule of thumb should be this: Kim Kardashian will not get you rich.
Okay, so I'm not gonna beat this guy up too much. I think his name is Vern. I've never actually knew his name. I think he might be a comedian or something like that. I think he comes on every once in a while just to give his hot take on something that's going on here. But this episode was about a celebrity pump and dump, right? Where, celebrities, I'm not gonna name any names, but celebrities effectively are given currencies by a founder who basically pre-mined a ton of coins, right? So they created this currency, they pre-mined a bunch of the currencies, they kept a lion's share for themselves, and they gave some to the celebrities to promote. And once they promote, essentially it creates this flurry of buy pressure, and the entire time while retail is buying into this, the sellers are selling into that buy pressure, okay? Total pump and dump scheme. And if guilty, they should all go to jail. All of them. The founder should go to jail. The celebrity should, have their assets seized and go to jail. All of that should happen, okay? Completely agree. Now, if they stop there, totally fine. But they didn't stop there. They decided to go into the merits and utilities of Bitcoin here. And this is where they get into trouble because they don't understand it. On an elementary level, they don't understand it. So, okay, I'm here to correct the statements that he's making. The first statement that he makes is that Bitcoin has utility. True. Second statement that he makes is that utility was privacy. False. The power of Bitcoin is not in privacy. The power of Bitcoin is in transparency, okay? And what I mean by transparency, I know that's a word that maybe not a lot of people understand, but what I'm gonna tell you here is that every transaction is viewable. The code is completely auditable. You can go onto GitHub right now, go to Bitcoin Core, and you can check out the code yourself if you understand it. You can fork that chain. You can run the code yourself. So every transaction that's ever happened is viewable. You can go to blockchain.com/explorer and you can see any transaction that has ever happened, even the ones happening in real time. Okay, you can see the latest block. You can see the latest transaction. If you type in a public key, you can see any transaction that has happened on that public key. Okay, it's not private. Bitcoin is not designed for privacy. Privacy is a byproduct of the cryptographic nature of the protocol. Okay, so yes, although I can see every transaction on the Bitcoin chain, I can view and audit every transaction that's ever happened. My name is not on those transactions. So yes, there's a bit of privacy there. As in, my first name and my last name are not on those transactions. So fine, but that's not the point of the Bitcoin network. The point of the Bitcoin network is that we know where all the money is. We see where all the transactions are. Nothing can hide. That's the point. Okay, so to illustrate this idea, I know that's still difficult. So to illustrate this idea, I'm going to give you a scenario. Okay, what he's essentially saying here is that I'm at a restaurant and I owe a guy some money. I'm going to go outside with him and I'm going to give him the money outside because I don't want anybody to see it. But effectively, the FBI is outside and they're watching our transaction happen and we just don't know it, right? They have a backdoor into this. They can see our transaction without us knowing. Okay, that's not how Bitcoin works. Effectively, to illustrate how Bitcoin works, imagine you're in the restaurant, you owe someone some money, and you're going to give them that money. Here's $5, right? Before you do that, before you give the $5, you're going to stand up and you're going to broadcast this as a message to the entire restaurant, right? To the entire bar. You're going to tell everybody, hey, look, everyone, I'm going to give so-and-so $5, okay? Does everyone see this happen? Okay, once everyone agrees that they saw it happen, transaction completed, okay? Effectively. Now, Bitcoin actually takes this a step further. Okay, so imagine that not only am I going to broadcast this message, but I'm also going to ask everyone in the restaurant to stand up and pull all their money out of their pocket, put it on the table, count their money, and make sure that I did not steal the $5 that I'm about to give to person X. Okay, so count your money, make sure all your money is there, because that's going to prove that I didn't steal anyone else's money that I'm going to give to this person, okay? And then not only that, we'll take it a step further. We're going to take a photo of all the money on the table, right? To make sure everybody's money's where it's supposed to be and this $5 transaction simultaneously. And we're going to take that photo and we're going to put it on the wall, right? So that everyone can see it. So that's effectively the transparency of Bitcoin. You know, if I'm a hacker and I've hacked into some honeypot, some centralized honeypot where everyone's information is, or maybe I have access to the energy grid or whatever, some centralized place, and I've hacked this place. What I can do is I can demand Bitcoin, right? And so what the FBI can do is say, hey, look, anywhere that Bitcoin goes, we're going to follow it, right? Because it's an open ledger. We can follow those transactions. And when it ends up on a centralized exchange, we're going to call the exchange and tell them to shut that down, right? That's not going through a back door. That's going through the front door, right? And that's good. That's what we want, right? We don't want there to be total anonymity. We don't want there to be complete privacy. We want there to be some way of following transactions. There should be, but that ability to follow transactions should never come at the cost of my privacy, right? So yeah, it's private in a sense, but it's still very public, still very open. So the notion of FBI having a backdoor is completely false. I don't know where he's getting this from, but it constitutes a fundamental misunderstanding of how Bitcoin operates, okay? So we're gonna move on from there. FBI does not have a backdoor into Bitcoin, right? It's a public ledger, anyone can view it, and there's no backdoor. Okay, so let's move on. Here's what really got me. Anna's statements about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin are just astronomically false.
So, yeah, someone wrote in, Jonathan wrote in our super chat section and says, it's definitely important to do your own research in crypto. This is an emerging market and a complete shift in the dynamic of privacy, finance, gaming, and equality as we know it. Please don't use the equality argument, okay? Like, I love you, Jonathan, I really do, and thank you for writing in. I really appreciate your perspective, but I just want you to think a little more critically and not, because look, I remember when Silicon Valley was really in its heyday and everyone was buying the argument that their behavior was democratizing everything, and we saw how that turned out. If you look at the individuals who benefit from cryptocurrency, it is not, there's no equality here, okay? There's actually more inequality in cryptocurrency than there is in the entirety of the US economy.
Say what now? Say what now? I'm sorry, what did you say? Let's forget the fact that that's an apples and oranges comparison, because the economy actually involves jobs, mortgages, it involves the housing market, it involves inflation, it involves access to capital, and we can go on, right? That entire US economy is massive. It's multifaceted. There's no way you can isolate that enough to have a proper metrics to compare it to a cryptocurrency. That's just not even possible, right? We're comparing a cryptocurrency to an entire US ecosystem. That's nonsensical. I'm going to say, let's go tit for tat here. We're going to say Bitcoin versus US dollar. Let's just do that. So let's break this down into 3 components. Wallet balance, right? We'll say participation, and we'll say big money players, because later on, this guy mentions JP Morgan Chase. So let's start with wallet balances. Now, I think this might be what she's talking about when she refers to inequality. Balances, how much money your wallet has, okay? Now, for brevity reasons, if you're somebody who understands cryptocurrencies, I'm going to say a lot of things that sound false to you or that sound inaccurate to you, because I'm trying to simplify this for the people watching who don't understand this stuff, okay? So a wallet is essentially a public and a private key that hold a balance of Bitcoin. That's not true, but that's the easiest way to look at it, okay? From a non-technical perspective. So it's a public and private key that hold a balance of Bitcoins. There was a report that came out, I think Bloomberg published this report from someone who also doesn't understand cryptocurrencies and how it works. And they reported that 1% controls 98% of Bitcoin, or something to that effect. Okay? False. Later, Glassnode comes out with a report that corrects this. Okay? But I guess she didn't read that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how this all works. Now, remember, if you're on the Bitcoin network, you only need a public and private key. That means that my wallet looks just like your wallet, looks like everybody else's wallet. That includes exchanges, private funds, retirement accounts, custodial accounts, miners. They all have the same public-private key that I do. So their wallet looks exactly like mine. So yes, it will look like there are gigantic wallets out there because they look exactly the same as mine. So yes, Coinbase is going to have a large balance, a huge balance, but they're holding cryptocurrencies for millions of people. Same thing with family offices. Same thing with retirement accounts. Same thing with Grayscale. These are large balances because they're holding multiple currencies for multiple people. Okay? And there's no number or limit of wallets that they can have, right? For security reasons, if I was Coinbase, I'd have multiple wallets. Why? Because I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, right? So I'm going to have multiple wallets with huge balances that carry the balances of millions of people. So Glassnode actually corrected this study that Bloomberg put out. And essentially, it's 1% that controls 30% of cryptocurrencies. Now, that's a lot, or 37% of cryptocurrencies. That's still a lot. That is a lot. Not going to lie about it. That is a lot. 1% controlling 30% is a lot. Let's talk about US dollar. Before we discuss US dollar wealth inequality, we need to understand US dollar production and distribution.
How much currency that has been sort of created out of thin air has been added into this economy through the Fed? What would you put as a figure? Would it be 6 trillion? Is that too much?
It would be, 6 trillion in terms of deposits with the banks and currency, be 6 to 7 trillion.
Okay. That they're just injecting into it sort of out of nothing.
Out of nothing. They're the central bank of the United States. Now, think about it. The central bank of the United States is the only institution on earth that can create dollars and pay for assets out of nothing.
It's alchemy. They're Rumpelstiltskin.
Well, yes.
Do you know what I mean? It all seems sort of fake.
Well, it's a fiduciary system. It's all faith-based, right?
Oh, my Lord.
Yes, you got to have confidence in that currency, in that dollar, because there's nothing backing. There's no gold backing.
So it's in some ways, it's a mass delusion.
Well, that's a harsh word, but so long as you have faith, yes.
So it begs the question, if the United States dollar is pegged to absolutely nothing of value, and it can be infinitely printed, then how does the US dollar remain the global currency? In other words, how did the government keep the scam alive? Well, the short answer, which goes slightly beyond the scope of this video, is mafia-style protection services offered to countries that produce oil. So oil is priced in dollars in exchange for protection. In a petrodollar system, dollar demand is secured by muscle. Thus, the US government is completely free to manipulate the value, supply, and distribution of the currency without consequence.
Yeah,
you know,
right,
and
right.
now I feel myself saying, hey man, well, let's just get $10 trillion coins, give one to China, one to Europe. Are we square? Good. And then we start again because this whole thing seems manufactured.
Okay, who receives the money?
All the people that own the debt of the United States. So that money would be received by China, by Europe, and all the debt holders.
Okay, all you're doing there is changing one debt for another, because the printing of the money is a liability, is a debt of the Federal Reserve System. That dollar, that liability that the Fed created, it's now owed to China.
No, we give it to, what I'm saying is we're giving it to them now and saying, we don't owe you that anymore. Here it is.
Yeah, but they have, what do they have? What did they
have
get?
they have $1 trillion.
$1 trillion of Fed liabilities. Of money.
Money that we printed, yeah.
Right, and that's a liability of the Federal Reserve. That's
and then
debt.
and then they forgive themselves and they just burn it.
Then they just say, you're okay, we like you, good luck. I don't think China's in the business of doing us any favors right now, and I don't think Europe is either, for that kind of, because why would they take the loss? Why would they take the loss?
I guess I'm confused as if we can print money. You just said we're the only.
We can buy an asset.
Okay.
Any asset by printing money. That is,
But you can't pay debt by printing money.
You can buy debt by printing money.
So what if we just buy back our debt?
Well, because all you're doing is.
I feel like you're having trouble. It's like talking to a monkey.
You're
like talking to a monkey and trying to figure out, how do I communicate with this monkey? I don't know what to do.
No. I totally get it's confusing.
Yeah.
But remember, creating money, it means that the Federal Reserve creates a liability, debt, to buy debt or buy other assets.
Right.
Okay, so if they go out and say, well, to China, we want the government debt, and they say, okay, and we say, we'll give you our deposit, our money.
That we've printed.
Right, China says, fine, what kind of interest are you gonna pay me? It's just another form of government debt. Am I making sense?
It makes sense in the make-believe world of Conjuring. Like there is a certain part of this that all feels like a mirage.
US dollar can't remain the world's global currency unless the world has access to it. So how does a foreign country get dollars to buy oil? Well, they can buy our debt, typically in the form of bonds and treasuries, which is laughable because fiat itself is a debt instrument. Thus, the interest payments on that debt is simply more debt, and the value of that debt is inflated away over time. So alternatively, they can become a production state, which means they sell goods and services to America in exchange for dollars. Both options require a complete rug pull of the middle and working class, as well as an expansion of US poverty. The only Americans that benefit are the quintillionaires, those closest to the money printer. So what does this look like today? The top 10% control 70% of US wealth. But the more disturbing number here is that the bottom 50% collectively control 2% of all US wealth. To illustrate this, you have $100 and 100 people. The bottom 50 people collectively control $2. Think about that. Now, in a perfect system of inequality, that would mean that each person in the bottom 50 would control about 4 cents. But we know it's not a perfect system. It's a tiered system, which means that there are some in the bottom 50 that would control 1 penny, while others would control 3, 4, or maybe 5 pennies. On a global scale, this is astronomically worse. The top 10% of adults control 85% of global wealth, while the top 30% of adults control 97% of global wealth. Think about that. And somehow this system is more equal and equitable than cryptocurrencies. Now, let's talk about who has access to markets, right? In Bitcoin, as I mentioned, you only need a public and private key, access to internet, and boom, you have access to Bitcoin. You do not need an exchange. You don't need to give KYC unless you're on a centralized exchange, okay? And you can do that. But for those of you who don't need to have high liquidity, if those of you who don't want to have your information put out there, if you want to have a public and private key, you can do that on your own. Okay. What do you need to have a bank account? Let's start there. Well, you need a valid ID. You need a social security. You need to be a resident. You need to have a permanent address, a phone number. I mean, maybe a blood sample. Maybe they take pictures of your face now. I don't know, but it's extensive. Okay. All of these things need to be exactly what the bank requires to, complete the KYC. Okay. Know your customer. Not only that, but if you have a bank account, you need to have a minimum balance of $4,000 in your account every month, or you need to have a service fee of $12 to $15 per month to pay for that account. For that reason, many people in America are unbanked or underbanked. Now, let's say you want to be an investor, right? You want to be an early investor in Tesla. Let's say you're the guy who found Tesla early, and you want to be an early investor. You need all of the things that we listed before to get your bank, but you also need to have $200,000 a year as income, or $300,000 a year if you're married. You need to have a Series 7, 65, or 82 license. Or you need to be involved and have working knowledge of institutional investment, which means you need to work for an institution. Alternatively, you can have an asset or your net worth can be above $1 million. Okay. Anybody? Most people are locked out of that. You're legally not allowed to participate in these markets. It's illegal for you to put money in. Even if you're able to get into these systems at any moment, the government or the bank could freeze your account, they could lock you out, they could limit your balance, they could do whatever they want because that money is not yours. The moment it goes in the bank, it belongs to the bank. That money is not yours at all. The government's protecting you. So make no mistake about it, the US dollar system is completely unequal. It was designed to be unequal, and it's been a barrier to entry for African Americans and people of color forever. So I don't want to hear anything about cryptocurrencies being less fair. Right? But we're not done yet. We got one more point on that front.
Like, just let that sink in for a second. So I don't.
Morgan Chase is already in there. Like this idea that it's this democratic, the little guys are gonna be able to get off. Like they're there already. And we know what happens whenever they show up somewhere, they take it over.
Yep, that's exactly right.
We're gonna talk about JP Morgan Chase and their involvement in Bitcoin. Now, yes, JP Morgan Chase is now in Bitcoin. But guess what? Jimmy Dimon hates Bitcoin. He despises Bitcoin. But guess who also does? Christine Lagarde, Charlie Munger. If these people hate Bitcoin, then don't you think you should understand it a little bit better? Don't you think there's a reason for that? Right? These are the people who are sitting next to the money printer. Infinite dollars coming their way. And they hate Bitcoin. Don't you think there's a reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, even within the report, something I thought was telling was when the IMF said that, quote, the banking sector can also come under pressure if the crypto ecosystem becomes an alternative to domestic bank deposits or even loans. Stronger competition for bank deposits through stablecoins held on crypto exchanges or private wallets may push local banks towards less stable and more expensive funding sources to maintain similar levels of loan growth. To unpack bullshit when you hear it, imagine if a bank had to offer you more than 0% in order for you to deposit into your savings account, and there was a market where they had to compete for you to deposit your money in interest-bearing accounts. Their fear is that all of this DeFi lending and crypto deposit lending may make rates go above zero, and that, commercial banks just can't compete with that type of interest rate environment.
Exactly. Oh man, we haven't talked about this at all yet. I sent you this topic like an hour and a half ago, and I was like, hey, we're going to talk about this, read this. And you guys are already jumping way ahead in terms of where I wanted to go. But let's just talk about that for a second. This idea that the thing that is least able to be tolerated is any alternative to our singular mandated solution is the underlying theme in all of this, right? Is just the fragility of the argument that they make, which is effectively that things would be going great if only people had no choice but to do what we're telling them to do. Right? I mean, like, in what non-bureaucratic setting, right, where the whole purpose is just like an exercise of control, is that even an argument that you can make, much less one that you can make without getting laughed out of the room? Like, that's not how things work in real life. But as far as the IMF is concerned, and this is not just the IMF, of course, the IMF is emblematic of a much sort of larger, we know what's best. And if only you would just do exactly what we tell you to do without asking any inconvenient questions or saying, hey, maybe there's another way to do this, then everything would be fine. Again, it's just such a weak positioning to not be able to withstand even a single bit of competition in any sort of meaningful capacity, or to be able to withstand a system or survive within a system where any alternative leads to the inevitable collapse because people don't want to do the thing you're talking about anyways. It's wild. Anyways.
These people are involved in Bitcoin because they have no choice. They see the money leaving their banks and going into Coinbase, going into Kraken, going into these custodial exchanges. They see the money leaving. They don't like it. So they have to get involved so they don't get blockbustered. That's what they're afraid of. They don't want to get blockbustered. That's it. Now, the other side to this is that, yes, he's involved, but he can't freeze your account. He can't limit your balance. He can't change your balance. Now, eventually, yes, the banks will have control of a certain number of Bitcoin and wallets, and regular people who have not gotten into Bitcoin yet will have to go through them, right? But the rest of us are totally fine having their own wallets. That's just how it's going to work. There's no one that can stop me. So yeah, Bitcoin right now, they're trying to figure out a way to make it accessible for the rest of you. PayPal, JP Morgan Chase, they're all going to be involved. And yeah, you're going to be involved in one way or another, whether you know it or not. So yeah, they were always going to be involved, but at least they have to play by everybody else's rules. Remember, their wallet looks like my wallet. They don't get any special privileges. They got no special privileges. The only privilege they have is the ability to buy more Bitcoin. Why is that? Because the government prints infinite money and they sit next to the printer. So yeah, they're going to have access to capital and they're going to be able to buy more Bitcoin. Good for them. At the end of the day, it doesn't change a thing. And eventually, they're a business. They're going to need to sell, right? Because they're not in it for Bitcoin. They're in it for the profit. And eventually they will sell. And that's how the transfer of wealth happens. Our last video clip here is about the price of Bitcoin taking a dive.
Let me give you the details on what's happening. Starting with Bitcoin, which has lost almost a quarter of its value this year alone. The price of Bitcoin has fallen from its November highs of nearly $70,000 to now around $35,000. On Saturday, Bitcoin, the world's largest cryptocurrency by market value, had fallen around 9% in just 24 hours. Since the start of the year, it has fallen around 23%.
Right now, this doesn't offend me at all. I've been dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin for 7 years, right? I've been in this game for a long time. I dollar cost average in. I'm not a trader. I'm not trading my money around. I'm selling my dollars for Bitcoin because Bitcoin has a limited supply and it can't be controlled. There's nothing else to it. US dollar has an infinite supply and its inflation schedule is out of control. They're just printing money as much as they want. And that money is going as a government subsidy to corporations. And yes, they inflate the stock price with that money. I don't put my money into US markets as much as I do in Bitcoin, right? But the point is, if you're not in any markets at all, you're going to lose to inflation. That's what's going to happen to you. Okay. So they're looking at the Bitcoin price and they're saying, oh, it's taken a dive. It's correlated with the US market. Of course it is. As long as it is being purchased by people in the United States, it's going to be correlated with the US market. It's just how it works. Bitcoin does not have an underwriter. In other words, it doesn't have a bank that assigns it a value. The value of Bitcoin is through price discovery, which means it went from zero and now it's worth $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. But it can't go up forever. There needs to be someone on the other side of that trade that shorts it. It needs to happen in order to maintain a true value of Bitcoin. It has to work that way. Okay, if you don't understand that, then you simply don't understand markets, and that's fine. But again, you shouldn't be talking about it unless you do.
And Ether plunged to as low as $2,176, its lowest since July.
You know, I've been in this game for a long enough time. I understand that there's ebbs and flows, and the Bitcoin price dropping is part of a reaccumulation period where the big whales try to shake out all the unstable hands and make them feel uncomfortable, sell at a loss so they can buy back in cheaper. It's a fool's game. So don't play that game. Dollar cost average, be smart about investment. Only invest what you're willing to lose. That's it, okay?
And there is an explanation for what's going on, and it has to do with something that Russia is considering, something very similar to what China has already implemented. Regulations on cryptocurrency, which, turns out that that's possible. This decentralized, way of this decentralized currency apparently can be regulated. Russia's central bank issued a harsh report on cryptocurrencies, including a potential ban on mining and trading. Russia accounts for about 10% of global Bitcoin mining capacity, making it a major hub for processing transactions on the network.
At this point, they're talking about the reason for the Bitcoin price going down was China, which is false. Yes, China banned mining in China. Fair enough. We don't care. Okay, where did those Chinese miners go? They went to America, right? If America bans it, they go to El Salvador. They go to another country. There are literally 195 countries in the planet. Any of them are fine. You can still use it. The part that bothers me the most is the fact that they sound like they're rooting for China. It's almost like, yeah, China banned Bitcoin. Yeah, it's like, I thought you said it was decentralized. I thought you said it was immutable. Yes, all of those things are still true, by the way. We're talking about a country that is accused and probably liable for some of the worst human rights offenses known to man. China banned it because China bans things that constitute freedom. And if you know anything about money and its relationship to speech, you will understand that if you ban the money or if you control the money, you control speech. No surprise, China banned it.
And so money is a form of power. And when it is decentralized, as it is in Bitcoin, it offends and challenges the concentration of power and the concentration of money that has occurred in traditional systems. And all of this comes back to probably one of the most important and relevant sayings about power, which is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when it comes to the combination of money and power, that is the most corrupting influence you can have on an individual's personality. And so one of the elements we have to look at with power is how concentration of power leads to concentration of money, and concentration of money leads to concentration of power by allowing people to change the rules, to buy themselves a different set of rules than everybody else.
If China is banning Bitcoin, you should be asking why, okay? Why is China banning Bitcoin? Why don't they want people to use Bitcoin? What does Bitcoin constitute? What does it represent, right? It's funny because here's the other side of this. A year ago, Bitcoin was scammy and terrible because China has it. Now, it's scammy and terrible because China banned it. I literally can't keep track of all of the misinformation and the doublespeak about Bitcoin. I literally can't keep track of it. People go from, oh, it's a scam, to, oh, wait, it's not a scam, but China controls it. Oh, wait, it's not controlled by China, but it's bad for the environment. It's just like a laundry list of things. And it's like, as your knowledge of Bitcoin progresses, you start to understand that people will just reject anything that's different.
So Francesca, I wanted to bring you in to comment on this because, again, there's been this like long-held notion that cryptocurrency is just so much better than the currencies we're used to. It's decentralized, governments can't regulate it.
It is. The hash rate has never been higher.
China has already done so, which led to some of the richest people in China losing like a third of their wealth. And now it seems like Russia is considering something similar.
Well, yeah, I mean, the idea that any kind of monetary regulation or that regulation of a currency is bad is a flawed understanding of how finance works. And let's be real, do not have a full grasp, but I do know that many countries would have toppled over and over and over and gone into the dumps, including our own, had their currencies not been regulated, had federal governments, had the feds not deliberately and specifically worked so that all of our life savings wouldn't just disappear every 2 years because the country we were mining our cloud-based currency in decided that they didn't want to do that no more. You know what I mean? Like,
this is a progressive network. These people are progressives. They go on the air every day and they talk about inequalities in the housing market, tuition, predatory lending. They talk about inflation and its effect on my immigration and foreign countries that are pegged to the US dollar, the stock market being artificially inflated, and they can't somehow figure out that 12 people's ability to decide the financial fate of billions of people is the wrong way to do it. They can't figure that out. I literally don't understand. They're advocating for a system of inequality. It's so strange.
And when you're talking about a country, like, the politics is never going to be able to be separated from the monetary policy, though.
But that's the holy grail of monetary policy. That is the false promise that neutral, independent central bankers can deliver this kind of technocratic, quasi-algorithmic, numbers-based, unpoliticized policy. None do. And the further away you take them from monetary goals, the more you introduce other goals like unemployment, the more impossible that task becomes.
Okay, so let's move into the last thing here.
There's the Bitcoin problem. So this idea that it's from the future, it's the great equalizer, nah, bro.
If they don't understand it on a protocol level, it's really easy to discount. Now, I get that Bitcoin is difficult. The people who created it, the person or peoples that created Bitcoin, are not from the future. These are all technologies that have existed for a long time. They're all tried and true technologies, okay? They all have their role to play in Bitcoin. They're not new. It's basically a Frankenstein of older technologies, right? That has been put together to solve the double spend problem and to make transfer of currency or messages more efficient and less centralized. And as long as it's done that, it's accomplished its goal. Bitcoin is an experimental technology. I get it. It's not perfect, but it's better than what we have. What I'm here to caution you against is listening to people who don't understand it, but have made their opinions about it. That's weird. Don't listen to those people. Don't fall into that trap. Do your own research. And if you don't understand it, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Like, just let that sink in for a second.